Okay, so this video is for beginning to learn the pathways, and specifically what we're going to talk about here is trigeminal information, somatosensory information from the head and face, which is the trigeminal system. Okay? Trigeminal system. So we start with some type of receptor. This can be mechanoreceptor or free nerve endings or even proprioceptors, right, in the periphery. So some sort of little receptor out here in the periphery. And there are 3 dermatomes on the face. You have ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular. And so there are 3 branches of the trigeminal nerve that are associated with those 3 dermatomes, and the 3 branches of the nerve have those same names, okay? Ophthalmic, maxillary, and mandibular branches of the trigeminal nerve, okay? It's in the periphery, so a collection of axons is a nerve, okay? Trigeminal. So this is the first order axon in the pathway. So what does that mean about its cell body? Okay, it means the cell body is going to be located in the trigeminal ganglion for information about pain and temperature or fine discrimination touch. There is an exception to that rule, and that's for proprioception. We'll talk about that in a second. But for pain, temperature, and fine discrimination touch, okay, the cell body, the first order cell body, is in the trigeminal ganglion, right? Ganglion. So we're outside of the CNS. Okay, so these are still pseudo-unipolar neurons. So it has the central portion of its axon, right? Here's the peripheral portion. Now it has the central portion of its axon. It's going to enter the brain stem. Okay, and it's going to enter. Sorry, I shouldn't have synapse quite yet. It's going to enter the brain stem at the level of the pons. Okay, this is a brain stem. Okay, so we're entering at the level of the pons, and these fibers are going to synapse there, and they're going to synapse within the trigeminal ganglion. The trigeminal nucleus, I'm sorry. Trigeminal nucleus. Trigeminal nucleus is this long chain of neurons, right? It's a nucleus, so it's cell bodies. This long chain of neurons, that whole thing, all together is the trigeminal nucleus. There's the spinal part, right? So this is called the spinal trigeminal nucleus. There's the main or chief. This is the main. And then there's the mesencephalic or midbrain component. Okay, so mesencephalic trigeminal nucleus. 3 parts. So as these axons, these first order axons, come in to the brainstem, they separate based on modality. Okay, based on modality. So the ones that are going to convey fine discrimination touch go straight across, okay, within the pons, and they synapse within the main trigeminal nucleus. Okay, so therefore the main trigeminal nucleus is fine discrimination touch. Okay, the axons that are coming in from free nerve endings conveying pain and temperature, those axons will descend. They'll actually come down to the bottom part of the spinal trigeminal nucleus, goes down to about C3. Okay, and they're going to synapse on second order neurons within the spinal trigeminal nucleus. Okay, and so these 2 sets of neurons are second order neurons. So what does the axon of the second order neuron do for information traveling to consciousness? Hopefully you remember that it crosses the midline. Okay, so this is going to cross the midline, and then it's going to ascend. Let's just get this out of the way. The same thing for the spinal ones. They're going to cross the midline, and then they're going to ascend. And together, these axons are the ventral trigeminothalamic tract, or VTT. Okay, so remember that tells you both where they came from. They came from the trigeminal nucleus and where they're going to. They're going to the thalamus. Okay, so these are going to go up and synapse in the thalamus. Specifically, they're going to synapse in the VPM of the thalamus, right? VPL is for body. This is body. But right now we're talking about the head and face. So that's the VPM. Okay, so these axons. So in the VPM, you're going to have both pain and temperature and fine discrimination touch. Okay, right? So then they're synapsing on the third order neurons that are in the thalamus. What do those neurons do? All those neurons ascend to S1, right? Primary somatosensory cortex, where they synapse on the fourth order neuron, right? So they're going to go to Brodmann's areas 3, 1, and 2 in the postcentral gyrus. Right? Those are the thalamic ones. We've already crossed the midline, so these cell bodies are ipsilateral to their synapse, to where they're going to terminate, okay, for the thalamic neurons. Okay, so we haven't talked about proprioception here. So, of course, there always has to be one exception, one difficult exception, and that's in this mesencephalic nucleus. Okay, so these axons pass through the trigeminal nucleus to their first order cell body in the mesencephalic trigeminal nucleus. So only the information for proprioception from the face, that's the only place where there are first order cell bodies in the CNS. Okay, that's the one exception to the rule that usually first order cell bodies are in the ganglia, right? Either trigeminal for head and face or dorsal root for body. But here, this is the one exception to that rule. The axon just goes right through the ganglion. So if you lesion the ganglion, even though the cell body's not there, the axon's traveling through, and that's why you'll still have a loss of proprioception. Okay, so its axon travels through the ganglion to its cell body in the mesencephalic trigeminal nucleus. Now, we typically don't describe the pathways much further than this, but conscious proprioception will cross the midline, will go to VPM, and ultimately to primary somatosensory cortex. There's also non-conscious proprioceptive information that will travel to the ipsilateral cerebellum, and make up the head part of the body map within the cerebellum. Okay? All right, so let's look at lesions now. Okay, so what if you have a lesion of the trigeminal ganglion, right? The trigeminal ganglion. What happens? So the first thing you want to ask yourself, well, it's ganglion, it's outside the CNS, so you know that much, it's cell bodies. Hopefully you also know that it's first order cell bodies. So what does that mean? That means it hasn't crossed the midline. Okay, so they haven't crossed the midline. So that means the deficit's going to be ipsilateral to the lesion, right? Because we're going to follow these axons that are eliminated back to where their receptor was. It's on the same side, okay? So if this is the left side of the body, over here's the right side. Okay, so over here's where I can't feel, and here's where the lesion, they're both on the left side. Okay, so which modalities are lost? What somatosensations are lost? And remember that they're all in the ganglion. So you're going to lose pain, temperature, fine discrimination, touch, and proprioception from the head and face. Okay, so the answer to what happens when you have a lesion of the left trigeminal ganglion, the answer is you have a loss of pain, temperature, fine discrimination, touch, and proprioception from the left side of the face. Okay. All right, what happens if you have a lesion specifically of the spinal trigeminal nucleus? Spinal trigeminal nucleus. Okay, so when you hear spinal, hopefully you remember pain and temperature. Okay, so I know I'm going to have a loss of pain and temperature. Okay, specifically pain and temperature. You heard trigeminal, so hopefully you think face. Okay, spinal pain, trigeminal face. Okay, so I'm going to have a loss of pain and temperature on the face, and my lesion's on the left side. Will that loss be on the left side of the face or the right side of the face? Okay, well, let's follow the axons back to their receptors where I can no longer, oh, here's where I can no longer feel. Left side, right? The pathway has not yet crossed the midline, right? It's going from periphery up to cortex, hasn't crossed the midline yet, so it's going to be same side. The deficits will be on the same side as the lesion. What if I have a lesion of the VTT below the level of the pons, right? Here's the pons. So below the level of the pons, here's the VTT. They're named that, the ventral trigeminal thalamic tract. As soon as the axons cross the midline, then they have that name, VTT. So if I have a lesion of the VTT below the level of the pons, what will I lose? Now in this case, I will not lose fine discrimination touch because that's entering above the level of the lesion, and that's all intact. That's fine. So I'll only lose pain and temperature, and I'm going to lose it on the face because you heard the word trigeminal, but will I lose it on the left side or the right side of the face? So this lesion's on the right side of the body, right? This is the right side. Here's the midline. So let's follow the axons back to where I can no longer feel. Oh, here's the place where I can no longer feel, on the left side. The pathway's already crossed the midline, so that means I'm going to have a contralateral deficit. The deficit will be contralateral to the lesion. If I have a lesion of the VTT at the level of the pons or above, now I will lose fine discrimination touch, right? Because that's where those fibers are entering, but I'll also lose pain and temperature, right? I'll also lose pain and temperature because at the level of the pons and above, anywhere up here along the VTT, I'm going to lose fine discrimination touch and pain and temperature on the contralateral face. Okay, right? The pathway's crossed, so it's contralateral. Same thing, if I have a lesion of the VPM or the S1 cortex, I'm going to lose all of the somatosensory modalities, right? And that will be contralateral to the lesion itself.